Welcome to Career Coffee Chat. I'm your host, Aaron Urban. I'm super excited to talk to you today about quiet quitting. What the heck is it? Everybody's talking about this term. Is it actually a new thing? I don't know that it is. In fact, my guest today also proposes that quiet quitting, as we all know and love this term now, or maybe not so much love it, is not necessarily a new phenomenon. In fact, it is just simply a new term for something that's been around for quite some time. So, as you tune into the Career Coffee Chat show today, whether you're watching live now on the live stream or you're listening to the replay, please say hi. Don't be shy. Say hi. Say where you're from. I want to welcome you to the show. And most importantly, I want to engage you, pick your brain, hear your thoughts. If you have questions, comments, please pop them in the chat. Or if you have something more specific, shoot me an email, text, a voice message, a PM, or what have you. We've got all the tools at our disposal, or to my wonderful guests who we'll introduce here in a moment. Now, if you're interested in knowing how to elevate your impact in the future of work, this is the right place for you to be. We'll be talking about not only for what employers need to be looking at for the future of work and how to position themselves to increase employee engagement, increase retention, and make sure that their employees are thriving in innovative space. But we'll also be talking about employees and how they can show up 100% during these very tumultuous times. So I'm excited to share with you today all of these important tactics. And of course, you know me, neuroscience nerd. What is going on and why are we seeing some of these things that seem to be a little counterintuitive? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we're going through a lot of change. And if you're interested in knowing more about change and most importantly, how to thrive through change, be sure to check out the Career Coffee Chat podcast, also available on my YouTube channel and on your favorite podcasting channel all over the world. Broadcasting every other week, we share top tips, insights from guests all around the world about how to thrive and elevate your impact in the never normal and what the future of work looks like and how you can stand above, stand out, speak up, and rise up, friends. So glad to see you today. Now, today, again, we'll be talking about quiet quitting, what it is, what it isn't. And my guest, Lori-Ann Duguay, the People Person Growth Solutions. She's the CEO of People Person Growth Solutions. She shares her expert insights into what is quiet quitting and how companies can effectively respond to this trend. Now, it's interesting. In one of her recent blogs, she states, "But is quiet quitting really a new concept?" She says, not at all. In fact, it's a way of rebranding one of the old symptoms of this phenomenon that's plagued organizations for years: employee disengagement and presenteeism. So Lori is the founder and CEO of the People Person HR Growth Solutions. She helps organizations with a growth mindset ignite organizational transformations by helping them assess and optimize their end-to-end employee journey and talent management strategy. Now, what she does is she combines expertise accumulated from 20 years of working in government as HR strategist with powerful everything disc psychometric tools as she provides organizations with the training, tools, resources required to unleash and maintain their team's full potential. So I want to welcome Lori to the show. Lori, it's great to see you today.
Great to see you, Erin. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Now, so we spent some time chatting before the show, of course, and it's so interesting. And when we were talking before the show starts, we're like, gosh, maybe we should record this. So I'd love to hear, what was your catalyst when you thought about, going out and fostering this new company that helps organizations engage their employees, grow their growth, increase retention, have better processes when it comes to HR strategies. What was that catalyst for you? I'd love to hear, why are you doing what you do now?
Yeah, whether it was one specific kind of event, not sure. I think it was accumulation, a number of cumulative events that contributed to my decision. As I mentioned, and you mentioned in the intro, and I worked for 21 years for government. And within that environment, so two stories. First story, I'll never forget going to my first meetings back in 1999, totally dating myself here. And then I would come in with these big ideas and these different ways of doing things. And I would say about 80% of the people at the table had every reason why that idea wouldn't work. Could tell me, we've tried that in the past. it fell flat, it's not going to work. And so this became kind of a repetitive thing. And at one point I remember, I think I was about a year and a half into my tenure with government, and I was like, oh, you know what? Like, at what point do you become this dinosaur, this naysayer, this total skeptic? Like, when does that happen? The
That's so
cynical
funny.
approach. And I would say it's about the 7-year mark it happened for me personally. It was like one changeover of government, and then I remember having new blood at the table, and they're coming in with their big ideas, and I remember thinking, oh boy, here we go.
Oh no, you did it
I had
too.
become that person. I had literally become that person. And I remember leaving that meeting and thinking, oh my God, that was my first inclination that, okay, I can't continue, to fall down this kind of, I don't know, vortex of negativity, because I'm early on in my career. So, then fast forward, I would say about 8-9 years, I started to see that I had essentially become a tenant of the workplace. So I was within government. I had a great job. I call them my golden shackles. You're with government. You've got a great pension. You've got all these beautiful benefits. Like, you should just stay there. That's gold, man. But really, I felt like my brain was dead. Like, there was no challenge. And as my children grew older, I needed that mental challenge, right? And I had done a lot of work within government trying to do, these initiatives to improve engagement, to improve our workplace culture, to try and, that in and of itself is a beast, to try and engage folks who they've already resorted to just being tenants. They're okay with that. They're good with that. They'll just stick around for another 15 years. And most people within government, you can ask them, and I'm not saying all people by all means, I'm saying a lot of people you can ask, how many years till D-Day, right? They know exactly when they're retired.
They know exactly to the minute.
Almost to like the day. It's crazy.
Calendar over here.
Yeah. Like at the end of the day, every day, it's like an X. Ooh, one day closer, right? And so I realized that wasn't enough for me, and that I was kind of at that midway point in my career where it was either I start to take what I've accumulated, marry it with, when I did my studies in organizational excellence, my post-grad, once I completed all that, how about I take all this and start to help others, start to help those who typically wouldn't. I started out with small to medium enterprise. So they typically wouldn't have an in-house HR. They typically wouldn't have any time to spend on that kind of strategy thinking, right? So moved into really starting to help these smaller things, all the while still working for government. And then it got to a point where I was basically taking all my holidays, because apparently there's a huge demand for this type of service, right?
I wonder why.
They want to improve their culture. They want to be able to attract the talent they need to survive, but not just survive, actually thrive. So I got to a point where I took a year off to try it, and then it just exploded. And I've been very blessed with some amazing projects. So I just decided to make it a permanent exit from government.
Yay! Because I know some people tuning in to Career Coffee Chat are looking to do pivots in their life. So hearing these types of stories and understanding, hey, what was the catalyst and how did you navigate it? Because it can be a scary prospect. To share with, if you're tuning in, whether it be now or later, and you kind of resonate with it, I was, feel like that in my current company. Is your current company one of those places where people just come to be tenants? I know that particularly in the past, when Houston, Texas, and oil and gas, that has been the case. You get some folks in, and because they just never go anywhere. They don't ever leave, and they don't ever really change, and so there's no growth happening.
There is no growth. And that's one of the things that was really, for me, when you talk about what was this kind of, what was the catalyst, it was, we would, after like the third time of doing an employee engagement survey, gathering this, like I call it gold, right? All this data on where is it that we're maybe missing the mark, and how is it we can improve, and what is it that people ultimately want, right? And it always drills down to like the 5 same things, but still, then we would do nothing of it, because it was, oh yeah, we check engagement, check mark, right? Everything was kind of a check mark exercise. And it got to a point where it was almost detracting to have to like think and work for that type of an organization who's doing it as a check mark exercise, as opposed to doing it to really drive change.
Because they want to, because they actually instead of just checking the box. So I'm interested to know, what was the 5 things though? You said it was always the same 5 things. So
I say we hear it a lot. Like and I've done them with all kinds of organizations. Communications is always huge, right? Or lack thereof, lack of transparency, right?
Transparency, yes.
Poor leadership is always a huge one as well.
Big one. Yep.
Not able to. Work-life balance is actually figuring way up there now. Not recognizing, the balance between having a life and having to work.
Oh boy, can we talk about that?
I know I thought you'd like that one.
Oh yeah.
So that always comes up front and center, and then growth. No, they don't see any potential for growth. They're not being invested in to grow their skills. No training and development is kind of the fifth one, that they're not being, they're not feeling that they're
I'm not feeling the love. I'm not feeling the love. You're not investing.
They're not feeling the love. Recognition's always a huge one as well. Like they're not feeling recognized, or the employer or organization is doing it as a one size fits all type approach, which is actually quite demotivating for certain people, right?
It is. And pizza parties don't work.
Yes, no.
And some people hate them.
Yeah, I agree. and no, you know what it is? They don't just hate them. Pizza parties, if you're not delivering on the rest of the stuff, it's almost lip service. And it can actually...
It's an insult. It's just like...
Yeah, it is. Wow. I'm not even going to show... I had an organization call me recently asking about wellness and saying that every year they have like a recognition event for their employees. And that this year, rather than the pizza party, because nobody's showing up at their pizza party anymore. And I said, well, before we continue this conversation, I need to talk about... Explain to me how you guys approach this pizza party and what's it about. She's like, well, it's our employee recognition, just to say thank you for all you do. I'm like, okay, and it's done on the same time of year, at the same time of year every year? Yeah, okay, totally predictable. Awesome. Then what else is there? Like, what are you doing throughout the year to recognize some of the successes and the contributions? Like, no, we only have a budget for the one time of year. Interesting. So for me, it's like, how about we question why people aren't showing up? How about we talk about the experience you're actually offering them on the job, that day-to-day, year-round experience, and see where maybe there's some gaps there, instead of offering this pizza. Because it's like, I'm going to sleep better tonight because I offered you a pizza lunch, right?
It's kind of like the lady who divorced the husband because he never said I love you. Never. She said, and his take was, well, I said I love you when we got married, and if that changes, I'll let you know.
Oh my God.
It doesn't work. And it's not that people are needy, it's just people are human beings, and there's certain tenets of it's what I call a social contract, if you will. And if those social contracts aren't met, then we get insulted, we leave. That's what happens. So I
have to play devil's advocate on that a bit, because you saw my intro, everything disc, right? Different personality styles. There's certain personality styles that require that feedback, that ongoing feedback all the time. They need to know it's part of their style, what fills their cup.
Yeah, they need it.
There's other styles that if you give them that feedback constantly, that's actually demotivating for them. They're going to be like, listen, let me do my work. You hired me for my competency, right? Like, I don't need you to be telling. So on that point, my partner, my husband's actually my polar opposite style. So his theory, I'm like, is dinner good? And he'll be like, yeah, if it wasn't good, I would have told you. And I'm like, see, exactly that same story. I'm like,
my husband too. Yeah. He's pretty good about it. He understands the social norm, so he's expected to deliver a response.
Yes.
It's very good, honey. And he means it. I mean, I know, because he's an engineer. He doesn't know how to lie. He's brutally honest. Never ask him how you look unless you want the honest truth. I learned that very early in our marriage.
It's absolutely true. And think about that now. Flip it to my context, my arena that I play in. As employers, they have to understand their team. They also have to understand and take the time to map out what are the different styles on their team, so that they can actually deliver and tailor and adapt their approach with each of those employees accordingly. They can not do it. Absolutely. Some will say like, oh, that just seems so onerous and so, like so much time consuming. I'm like, okay. Or you can continue to encounter these ongoing challenges and this pushback.
Miscommunications.
It's balls in your court. You do what you want to do, but
absolutely. And there is a way to hit, a strike, what I call a happy medium, where it resonates with all the work styles. It may not be as much as the people-driven people want, but it's enough to where they're like, okay. And then the task-driven people are like, well, it's a little bit more than I need, but it's not oppressive, right? And what we're talking about here is, disc styles, which I'm a huge disc aficionado. That's my go-to. I use everything disc or extended disc, and I think every organization, from the onboarding process, the hiring process, to the professional development process, in order to elevate your employee engagement, in order to elevate your employees' potential, then leverage their work styles. And even for the employee themselves, I mean, when I'm working with people and understanding their zone of genius, for example, we start with your work style. Most people may have taken a 5 million of these things, but the problem is what they are is their labeling process. And it's not a labeling process. It's not, oh, you're an EI or you're a, SC. No, it's not just, oh, here's your sign. It's much more than that. I
It's a
mean,
decoder.
it's tremendous. The knowledge and the data behind it can be
Crazy.
extremely empowering, not only for the employee, the employer. It's a beautiful process when done correctly.
Yeah. And I think that's where I always encourage clients to, I don't want this to be a one and done exercise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want you guys to say, I've done DISC. I want you to say, we use DISC. We use this on our day to day. We use this, we integrate it into everything we do, in the way that we manage conflict, in the way that we actually approach collaboration, in the way, we use DISC on the daily, because the only way, it's like any tool, the only way it's going to work is if you actually pull it out of your toolkit and actually use it on the regular.
Right. Absolutely. And that's been the case. Most, with the exception of one, only one organization has ever actually implemented and used it. Now, to be fair, it was a minimal use, but even then it was so helpful, and their use of it was more like, in order to increase communication, effectiveness, and be able to meet people at their stop, where their bus stop is, and that sort of thing. Hey, now we know, okay, Erin's a high red. She's a D. She's going to be, we had color codes, to make it super easy, and use these cool Legos, like put in everybody's, you would even color code your email that way, oh, I'm responding with somebody who's very people oriented first. So, okay, I need to be very intentional about understanding more about them personally during the exchange and being more personal about it. Oh, this person more fact-based. Well, I don't have to spend a whole lot of time in the fluff because they don't care. Right?
And just in talking with you, I already know your style, although we've never talked about it, but we've never divulged it, but I can totally tell. But it's funny because, if anything too, it's on my side. So for an email where I'll draft the email and I'll get cut right to the chase, like, okay, this is and then I'll purposely go back. And this only came with time, right? This stretch opportunity to say, okay, good morning. How are you? And it's not that it's disingenuous.
Putting the prefix in the
Yeah, it's not disingenuous. It's just to really optimize, to make sure that I'm actually integrating elements that'll speak to, every style, and that it's not going to be lost on, the messaging itself will be interpreted as close to the meaning that I had intended, right? By taking the time to actually put in those little things that make a huge difference. Ultimately, it really is game changing. And when you think about it, there's not just that basic everything DISC, right? So when I work with organizations, I have their management do the everything DISC management version. I don't know if you're
and there's so many really cool playbooks. I mean,
like,
I know extended DISC and everything DISC. I mean, both have, like, you can see your whole team, how they interact, and then like all kinds of tips. I mean, it's super awesome.
On a separate call, I'd love, let's do a separate call, like an offline, and I will certainly share with you, they actually have a whole platform now that when people complete it, they have access to everybody else on their team, and they get those maps automatically, and they're able to actually go in and see strategies to work better and to manage tension better with a specific person. Just as a means of, again, helps you understand it's not about labeling. It's about filling your toolkit with these decoders for all these people on your team. You understand how they're wired and what their innate kind of preferences and tendencies are. So, I mean, just to maximize that collaboration, it's a no-brainer to actually take 3 minutes and read through and say, oh my God, I was coming in, guns a-blazing, but that's actually going to be quite overwhelming for this kind of person. So
yeah. I mean, quick story. I mean, those of you who are familiar with your coffee chat show and listened to me before probably heard this many times, but I mean, my big aha moment was when I was an early career professional, super driven, get things done, metrics, what's next? I don't have time to make friends at work, that kind of thing. I mean, the whole nine. Yeah, I was that person. Whew. But I thought it was awesome, and I was on the right track for leadership. Totally mystified why I wasn't getting there, but hey. And then had the aha through feedback, 360-degree review, that I wasn't well liked. very much. I mean, it's not that people thought I was a bad person. They just were like, she doesn't care about us and who we are. And to be honest, I didn't see people as people. I saw them as positions.
Mm,
That's just
interesting.
my work style. And I need to, and I shifted. I did. I would like to say it was overnight. It wasn't. I had a little learning first, some self awareness first, and then I could grow. And that's why I tell people you have to become self aware first. That's one reason why we always start on the inside. Whenever if I'm doing disc or otherwise, we start
Yeah.
with you first, because if you're not self aware, it just falls flat. But yeah, I mean, it was a game changer for me to learn that there were different personality styles. I just thought everybody was supposed to be like me, and if they weren't, they were crazy. Right? I mean, it was, yeah.
And it's about seeing them like exactly the way your colleagues saw you. If they only knew that you actually were focused on the bigger picture and the results, and you probably needed stuff to move along, and that you were more focused on that, as opposed to interpreting it as, oh my gosh, she doesn't like me. She just doesn't care
Right.
about
But
anybody,
see,
right? So be able to
that's
shift that.
totally normal, though. I mean, with the work styles, when you come off to someone and you're a raging D, and that person is a high I or a high S, particularly high S,
That's really absolutely, but yeah,
it's going to be
100%.
instant. It's going to be instant clash, because D's and S's are polar opposites. C's and I's, or C's are very task, very, metrics driven, or not very data driven,
Data driven,
at the
analytical.
detail level.
Yeah.
Don't really necessarily, care so much about the people element per se. First off, I mean, it's not that they don't care. It's just that that's
Yeah.
not their first thing to gravitate to.
No,
And the
exactly.
high eyes, it's the opposite. It's like, oh, what about the people?
Yeah.
Well, you've talked about the process. What about the people? People.
Yeah,
And
it's
the
they all
process.
have their strengths. They all have their blind spots, if you will. And I think using these tools to empower your kind of collaboration, your team is game changing, because I always say you're only as good a driver as you're aware of your blind spots, right? So similar story to yours. When I first did my disc, like 10 years ago, and I read, and they would have us put X's on the statements that we felt weren't like us. And then they challenged us to like have a conversation with colleagues and friends, just say, hey, did this thing. It says that I'm a certain way. I don't see myself like that. Like, do you? And like, I swear to God, the one statement that I was like, no, I'm not like that. I told everybody had like 3 examples within the past 2 weeks of how exactly I was like that. And I was like, oh my God. Okay, Lori, it's time for you to have a bit of a aha moment here and start to figure out stretch opportunities on how to minimize the impact of that blind spot, right? Because it was something that was actually quite detrimental to certain styles. And it made so much sense as I'm starting to replay scenarios throughout my life and figured out that likely these people were of that style.
Exactly. They were
I
of
get it.
opposite style from you, and yeah. So for those of you tuning in, whether it be now or later, if you're collaborating with someone, or just there's someone in your life and you're pretty sure they're crazy, you can never see eye to eye, you just can't, like, what the heck.
Yeah.
Then chances are they're an opposite work style from you. They just listen and for information, communicate differently. It's just completely different. It's not that they're crazy, necessarily. And what's really interesting, I'm sure you might agree, Lori, is now more than ever, and I'm saying before it didn't matter, before it did, we got by, like, just for sheer momentum, we got by, but now it's non-negotiable. And that's for the employee and the employer. When we're talking about quiet quitting, we're talking about elevating engagement, we're talking about what does that mean. And I think we probably do need to dive into a little bit about what quiet quitting actually is. And as you may have figured out, it has something to do with engagement. But yeah, I mean, it's so essential. I mean, if there's just one thing, like, let's just say you want to start somewhere, I think this is a great place to start.
It is. It's a
Understanding the
quick
people.
fix. It's a quick fix that will then be kind of setting you up and building a foundation that you can then, implement some medium and longer term strategies to improve your overall culture, as well as increase your retention and your engagement. But it's a great starting point, because it will actually make people feel invested in. Like, here's a gift. We're giving you the gift of self-awareness, but also giving you a map to your colleagues, right? So it's a great starting point to facilitate when we talk about, you read my blog, right? Those 10 drivers of engagement. Like, it touches on so many of those 10 drivers in one product. But again, not to pitch that product specifically, just to say that any self-assessment tool, a personality assessment tool, is just, it's empowering and it's investing in their self-awareness.
Not any of them, to be fair. I mean, I am a little bit jaded towards DISC because of its superficial simplicity and the fact that it's so easy to implement and leverage in organizations. I will say that a lot of people lean on Myers-Briggs, and yes, you can use Myers-Briggs. The challenge I have, and I'm just being honest with you, my friends, tuning in an hour later, it's just too complicated.
It's too
Your
complicated.
employee cannot make it. It's a hard tool to leverage. They can't remember it all. It's just too complicated. So
it's 4 letters.
that's
I can't even remember my 4 letters.
I can only remember like DISC.
Yeah, I can only
remember INTJ-N or whatever it is now. No, when I started getting the dashes, I had
True Colors is the other extreme. I find it's too simplistic. So
Yeah.
I've done True Colors as well, and True Colors will give you kind of these high-level insights, but I find DISC is that in between where it not only tells you here's how you're wired, and I've had clients, it's so funny. I've had clients in the construction industry, and I'm doing a session with them, and they're like, were you following me? Because that stuff that you think nobody knows, but you know that that's how you react, is in there, and they're like, why is this in there? Why do they know about this? It's funny, but it's enough to really help you. Okay, yeah, this is totally valid. I get it. But here are some actual specific strategies. And when you're dealing with a certain person, and we teach them to actually on the fly read a person's probable style, and then here are some strategies to make that better next time. And it's crazy. It's
I need to have you back and have another chat around conflict management and how to handle it. Would you be okay with that?
Absolutely.
Let's plan that. So for those of you tuning in an hour later, just know we're going to come back and have because we can go some. I mean, it's just so juicy. I just love all of it. But I think for those people who are thinking, in the quiet quitting space, or if you're your employee, think about, okay, how can I elevate my impact? When I'm coaching people, this is where I start. Is that self-awareness piece, that understanding, and most importantly, empowering people to understand others. Because in order to influence, in order to connect with people, you don't understand them. It's not happening, right? And I think, Lori, let me know how you feel about this, but right now we're seeing this. It's almost as if people are more themselves than they were pre-2020. It's like this elevated.
The masks are lifted.
Condensed self coming through. So there's less filter. People are a little bit more here, focused on, how they are naturally is really how they're showing up. And less of that gloss, if you will, which might be a good thing in a way, because it's kind of forcing us to realize that, hey, you are always your real self in the workplace.
Yeah, exactly.
And David says, I would love to tune into a conflict management chat with you guys. All right, we have a vote. Any more votes? We're going to do this. This will be awesome. Absolutely. Because I know, Lori, you have a wealth of background and knowledge in that space.
Yes. I'm also I'm a dispute resolution practitioner, so I do mediation and all that fun jazz as well.
Yeah, particularly, and here's the thing. We were chatting before we went live. I know we should start recording these things, but we were chatting about, what I'm hearing from my leaders that I'm coaching. And they're like, why do I have to babysit these people? Now, to be fair, they're of an older generation. You're talking about, younger emerging professionals. I say, well, and Lori's like, that's not babysitting. I was like, well, maybe it is. So we had a really good conversation about that. So share a little bit about your insights into what we're really seeing here. And is it babysitting, or are we really empowering people with knowledge? What are we looking at?
That's what it is. Bottom line. I don't think it's babysitting. I think it's where leadership needs to end up. It's really about building capacity within your people, helping them see their own potential, helping, coaching them into uncovering their own solutions, into applying these life skills of critical thinking that translate directly to the labor market, to work. It's about really providing them. And I was using the example of a child. It's the difference between a parent telling the child every time they say, where's my jacket? Where are my socks? They're there, right? The child will always come back to you to ask you where that jacket, where are their socks. So many leaders that I too coach or I work with through my leadership development program, they'll say things like, oh my God, they come to me for every little thing. I I think you have enabled that, be it conscious or not, you've enabled that to some extent by providing them the answers all the time. If instead of telling them where their jacket is, you spent time saying, okay, so let's think about, where you last had your jacket. Now let's walk through what you did between now and then, and to try and think of where it might be, and then just go with that. It's crazy. Then the next time they're not going to ask you where their jacket is, because themselves, they're going to think, where did I last have my jacket? And they're going to apply it. Same things with employees, right? If you teach them and you coach them into uncovering their own solutions, then you're actually reducing their dependency and increasing their confidence and increasing, empowering them to then take ownership and to be more accountable towards themselves, but also towards the organization.
Yeah, be more self-authoring. I mean, we've heard a lot around, collaborative leadership, leader as coach. And this is really leading into the leader as coach space. And a lot of leaders are struggling with this because they've known the old paradigm, directive, command and control, which that doesn't really work anymore. And to be fair, it didn't. It worked, I would have to say, up to a certain point in the 1900s, and then it really started to fade into fast fashion. Generation X, hi, whom nobody ever talks about. We just came in and we're like, oh, this is what we have to do? All right. We'll put up with it because we don't have a choice. Somebody asked us, do you want something? Do you want a different leadership style? No, we didn't get that choice. But now we have enough people coming into the workplace that really is demanding this paradigm shift, and rightly so. I mean, command and control leadership, do as I say, do it not as I do, never really worked. It's not leadership, it's just bossing people around.
Love it. Yes, 100%.
Yeah, so
it is.
Really what they need requires a very different approach.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there's so many leaders are ill prepared to take that approach, though. They don't necessarily understand the how. They get the why, but they don't necessarily understand the how, because they may have been put through this more traditional kind of leadership development program that would have provided them with a lot of information, but whether or not it's actually applicable to the existing landscape, right, of workers within their team, probably not, right? So it's really a whole other beast, like understanding how to manage the different generations. That in and of itself is a skill, but that wasn't taught in the traditional leadership development programs, right? Understanding how to encourage conflict. We started out, we keep deviating from our initial conversation, but understanding how to encourage conflict as a means of striking innovation and diversity, and really helping to empower and to provide the tools to your team members to actually manage that conflict on a daily basis, and to understand that it's not
challenge that a little bit, because as we mentioned before, and I was going to challenge a little bit, because I have seen leaders do this. Now the challenge here is, ladies and gentlemen, those of you tuning in, an hour later, there's healthy conflict and unhealthy conflict. And it's really important to know the difference between the two. And also important, as we mentioned, generational. Laura, you mentioned generational, understanding how to interact, and most importantly, position, communication strategies based on the generational perspectives. Very, very different. Our younger folks coming in, now who are about, I would say, mid 30s and younger, sometimes a little bit older, elevated sensitivity levels. Okay. Yeah. When we talk about conflict, that's not comfortable. It's not okay. And they really do want this, everybody, this vanilla landscape, to a certain degree, not to a vast degree, but to a certain, because they haven't, that's not been a skill that's been thrust upon them. Right. So helping them, giving them the knowledge about what is a difference of opinion and how to handle it, and how to have great conversations that are engaging and fun, like this one. Like, we have a difference of opinion. It's okay.
Yeah, I'm not feeling defensive. No, exactly, right? But we're also being very respectful. So I think that also speaks to kind of the culture that you create in terms of what's acceptable, what's unacceptable, when you are communicating, when you are having those more courageous conversations, right? What are some of those kind of rules of conduct as you navigate that conversation? And I think it's really important to not only kind of, again, bring awareness to what are some of the emotions that are likely to creep up, and how could you, what are some of your, if you want to get into your neuroscience, what's your trigger that's happening in your brain, and why, and how can you actually pause and actually wait, here's how I'm interpreting it, and as a response to that trigger, I'm likely to become defensive. What if I helped clarify what they actually mean with kind of a response that's a little less kind of armed, just to check whether or not I'm actually interpreting that as close to
and depending on the work style, again, maybe that conversation needs to happen over several days, because the marination process needs to happen.
Yeah, or several emails, even one email. I know you stay away from
email. Let's talk about
that. That's a whole other one. We can play with that piece. But just, I mean, an email being like, here's what I've seen, we're going to continue this conversation live, but just, let's book it soon, but let's just make sure that here are some of the issues I need to discuss. So that, I mean, to that extent, but of course, if it's anything, I'm reneging. I'm taking that back. Not over email. What I mean is to make time, not to ambush. Don't come in and ambush them, right? Send out an email. There's certain styles they want an email to say, hey, I'd love to have a conversation with you. Would it be possible to steal 5 minutes of your time today, right? Or 10 minutes, whenever is at your earliest convenience,
right.
Whatever.
And give them some context, but maybe not. Be careful with your words.
Yes.
Now back to quiet quitting, which was kind of the purpose of our whole conversation. And those of you tuning in right now, or if you've been watching the replay, probably figured out it has a lot to do with engagement and how we interact with people is fueling this quiet quitting. But Lori, you mentioned that quiet quitting is not a new phenomenon. And I wholeheartedly agree. And I agree that there is just a slight nuance that's been facilitated by the experiences we've had for the past almost 3 years.
I agree. So it absolutely is not a new phenomenon. It's really just a new term of a symptom, specifically of a symptom that it's kind of one of those red flags of employee disengagement or presenteeism. But what it is it is a red flag of a symptom of this disengaged or this checked out employee who's essentially become, a tenant of the workspace. They're occupying space, but they're not doing much else. They're not taking on any extracurricular activities or projects. They're barely socializing with their colleagues. They're really only doing the strict minimum of what's required from their position, right? But it's certainly a symptom. But if anything, I'm happy about this kind of TikTok trending term, because it's bringing renewed awareness to a problem that we really need to start mitigating in light of, you're right. The pandemic absolutely exasperated, and I love what we chatted about. Again, we should have recorded that, but I'm sure you're going to repeat it for your viewers. In terms of what specifically kind of contributed to maybe an accelerated checkout, if you will. But ultimately, it's a chance to kind of re-examine in light of this now job seekers market. You're no longer like having a plethora of people applying for every position within your organization. It's a job seekers market. So you need to differentiate and create that work environment that's actually going to attract people. You need to kind of become and figure out what is the culture they want to work for, and how do I create it as a means of attracting and differentiating my recruitment strategies to be able to tap that high potential talent, right? Sorry, I'm going to let you go with I know you.
We're just busting at the seams. No, but you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, because we can't be complacent any longer. And it's a wonderful thing. This is a wonderful thing. Quiet quitting is actually a really good thing, because it's bringing to light in a very let's just say you can't ignore it anymore way. I mean, you just can't brush it under a rug. I mean, employee engagement has been low, and has been low for years. Prior to the pandemic, it's been a rampant problem, epidemic problem, I have to say. And we again have got by with it because of momentum, because we felt like, well, we really don't have to make a change, because they don't feel like quitting just yet. Well, now they kind of do, and some of them are just to the point where they're just done, and they don't even care if they can or not. And I'll explain why we're seeing this. Just nope, I'm out of here, I'm just quitting. And maybe they don't even have another job to go to. And the why is, hey, have we forgotten there was a pandemic? And what does it do? Okay, well, it has actual real repercussions other than just whether or not you call it COVID. It's beyond that. We shifted our entire way of being for 3 years. And then we're thrust into this very uncertain time, socially, economically. And that entire structure has been extremely uncertain. While our human brains simply aren't built to handle this much change and this much uncertainty. We can't. It's not physically possible. So, what the repercussion is from that is people have been living literally in fight or flight mode for almost 3 years. Not everybody, but a vast amount of people. And I shared this at the ASQ conference last week that I was speaking at. Because of this fight or flight mode that we've been in for so long, we're seeing elevated sensitivity levels. We're also seeing emotional fatigue, or is this what is being called disaster fatigue? That's another symptom and an outgrowth of that. What's also happening is our cognitive stores have been tapped out because the amount of stress that we were going through, we're not able, when you're in fight or flight, you're just really not able to access this very well. I mean, physically, you're pumped full of adrenaline, but that exhausts after a while. And as you know, when you're in fight or flight mode, I mean, that pandemic pounds, because in fight or flight, your body's pumping out more blood sugar, so your blood sugar gets elevated, it's easier to put on pounds. That's another reason why we saw pandemic pounds. We're like, wait a minute, I was walking more, I was doing more exercise. Where did all this weight come from? Because you're in fight or flight, you're in a higher stress level. Yeah, and you're using your brain less too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So yay. And on top of this, Americans worked up to 30-35% more than they normally did because no work-life boundaries, too easy just to sign back into work, and we tend to use busyness as a coping mechanism. On top of that, we had survivor's guilt. So in 2020, with all the layoffs, if you did have a job, you worked your butt off because I don't want to be fired. So, I mean, all of these layers. It's never just one thing,
Yeah.
But what it does end up, burnout, rampant. I was on a call right before this. It was a coaching call where we're discussing best practices and that sort of thing. And we're saying, okay, what are you seeing in your clients? Everybody, every person. And we had over 800 people from around the world on this webinar. Everybody said burnout.
Wow. That's telling.
So it's not quite quitting. It's just people don't have the capacity anymore. So they've been working at unsustainable pace, and oh goody, you got used to it. But it's not sustainable. So what is?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, certainly. And organizations, we mentioned this, they've been a bit spoiled, right? With that loss of transition time between meetings where you normally had to get from room A to room B, or even from building A to building B, right? That was gone. So that would have contributed that, we're hopping from one Zoom call to the next, or Teams, whatever your software preference is. So obviously they benefited from that increase in production, but now there needs to be a bit of an adjustment happening, right? A bit of a reset. We talked about the Great Reset. It's part of that Great Reset is a bit of a recreating, what's the norm and what's acceptable and what are some of the rules of conduct. And I alluded to prior to, something as from the flip side, for employees to understand that there needs to be boundaries. And if you do choose to work from home, that's fine, but you need to set yourself up as if you were in an office too, right? So we need to now shift back to some level of normal, or a new normal, if you will, that's going to be beneficial.
Very normal.
Yeah. Well, that's going to be mutually beneficial for the employee as well as the employer. I think there's, there was both sides suffered, the wrath of the pandemic by all means, absolutely. But now's an opportunity, to really reset and reinvent to some extent the employee experience and that employee journey that you do offer your clients, right? And that's where I think that's where the gold is, in my opinion. When I talked about self-awareness, and that you often start there with your coaching clients, right? You start with their self-awareness.
Right.
And then you start with them and just helping them understand what's their reality. And then you build from there. Well, I do the same thing with organizations. I map out their existing employee journey. If I'm an employee coming into your business right now, we're at the interview. What does that look like? What kinds of questions are you asking me? Okay, perfect. So I map out their current state as a means of bringing self-awareness where there might be actual, kind of gaps in that experience, and where there may be actual drivers or motivational, because you can't motivate a person directly. It would be beautiful if you did. My daughter would sleep a lot more. But you can't. But what you can do is create that work environment that they find highly motivating. So what does that look like? What are some of the things that actually motivate people to show up for work? And there's actually, depending on the literature out there, there's upwards of 25 drivers, motivational drivers at work. I've seen, based on all my experience with clients, 10 that tend to really resonate. And without using up all the time and going through them, I'll gladly share a link to kind of a blog.
Yes, please do. Yeah.
But really, if you're able to then, once you've created that self-awareness, you've mapped out that journey, and then you think, okay, so how is this experience, how we're doing it now, how we're pitching ourselves at how we're doing our interview process, how is it providing these 10 drivers? And you actually start to think about it. You're like, oh, it becomes clear as day where the gaps are and how you can implement. And it's crazy how quickly you can start to, kind of apply these shorter tweaks and pivots, and right away start to see, the value in terms of your increased engagement and retention, and then some medium and longer term kind of solutions.
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like quiet quitting is a really good thing.
It is. It absolutely
because it is bringing to light something that quite honestly should have been more important pre-pandemic. And now you can't look past it. It needs to be addressed. And how it's addressed also is important. And if you do something, even just starting off with understanding your employees' work styles and your work style, that's a great step. Or understanding the employee journey, that's a great step. Something is always a great step. And most importantly, communicating what you're doing with your employees is also a great step, because they want to know. And it doesn't need to be state secret. That's it. When you mention one of the top 5 things you always hear, communication being number 1, yes. Communication transparency is massive. And if companies don't get it, and leaders don't get it, then people will just go somewhere that, are more authentic and transparent.
And they have the luxury of that choice now, right?
That's the luxury of that choice. And they will more in the future. So for those of you tuning in, wondering about the future of work, looking at my crystal ball, we were looking at, moving into this. Was it hybrid? Is it remote? Is it da-da-da-da-da? It's neither. It's virtual. And that's the future of work. And that ship has sailed. So, like it or not, that's where we're going. So, figuring out this engagement strategy, start also thinking how you're going to do it virtually. And I mean, virtual.
And can I also add authentically virtually?
Yes, authentic
by having like this pre-scheduled recurring meeting at 3 p.m. that this is coffee talk, and then people show up and there's like rampant awkwardness amongst everyone there because they're being voluntold to be social. It's that's not doing it right.
Or my personal favorite, no kidding. Now I talk a lot about well-being in the workplace and that sort of thing. And I was giving a talk with an HR symposium earlier in this summer. One of the organizations, literally, I can't make this stuff up. They said, okay, well, this is our well-being strategy. We've got this great strategy. We're hiring therapists because that, and they're not changing anything else. They're still working their employees to the bone. I mean, it's ridiculous expectations, but they're hiring a therapist so their employees can talk to the therapist so they'll feel better about the amount of hours they're putting in. Oh, shit. I'm serious. Like, this is actually happening. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me, right?
God.
It's amazing, but that's not one of the strategies you want to use. Okay.
Oh my God. That's wow. That's.
So I'd love to hear from you if you're tuning in an hour later. What crazy well-being strategy or employee engagement strategy? Like, what's the craziest one you've seen or heard? And if you want to pop that in the comments, whether or not we're live at the time, I'd love to see them because, of course, I do get notified. I would love to engage with you about those because it's worth a good smile and worth hearing. And then if you're a leader or an HR person or talent development or whatever that looks like for you, and you're thinking about what strategies you can leverage, reach out to myself, reach out to Lori. We're happy to help. We're here to, build a better engagement journey for your company, particularly Lori. That's her jam. My jam's Zone of Genius. So that's her jam. She does the strategy portion. I do the Zone of Genius portion. So, reach out to us. We're happy to help. Lori, it's been a big pleasure. Any golden nugget you want to share before we sign off today?
A golden nugget per se, not really, just that a lot of people think that it would be extremely time consuming to start to look into, and everybody knows how to do culture better. They just don't understand, what is it that people want to, makes people want to show up for work? They're starting to get that. That's fine. But I think where they fail to realize the how is your talent development, is to really think about how are you managing your talent? How are you bringing them in? And what kind of curated developmental opportunities are you giving them? And how are you meeting them where they're at? And helping them grow in a way that they're comfortable with, but also that enables them to stretch a bit and really step into their potential, right? So really understanding kind of that interdependency between culture and engagement and talent development is just game changing.
Yeah, it is like game changing. As I shared with you before we started the show, TD has been basically on the shelf for the last several economic downturns, and that's accumulated to around about 10 years or so. And that's a problem. And it's one of the reasons why you're seeing people quitting, because I just did a survey. I did a quick study, a quick survey on my own, and found that poor leadership was the main reason why people were leaving organizations. Well, why is that? Well, have you invested in your leadership? Have you coached your leadership? Have you trained your leadership? Do they know what leadership is versus just management versus just administration? Chances are no, because you fired all your TD people. That's why. Talent development has been non-existent, or it's been some webinar you told your people to attend, and that just doesn't work. So please, if you get nothing else out of this, employers, invest in your TD development, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. And in your leadership development, from what you're saying, right? That's what I was telling you before the show, that's why I built that people-centered leadership development program. We really needed something that was comprehensive, but not just a webinar, a one and done. It's like 12 modules where in between they're actually applying it in their workplace, and they're actually having to develop and develop a plan to solve an existing TD issue within their organization. And then they're connected with a coach where they're coached for a 6-month period, because after all that training, and they've tried it, but it's not until you actually hone it for another 6 months and you've got that accountability partner and you've got someone it's lonely being a leader. It's one of the things I hear loud and clear for all my leaders. Like when I do like a reality check, and what's the realities of a leader? And one of them is it's very lonely. You're that conduit between your senior leadership and then your direct reports. And that's a very lonely place. So certainly, if you're able to offer a more robust solution and a more robust training, then that's the route to go. For sure.
So we've got all kinds of solutions, but here's one thing: those of you tuning in now or later, my friends, pick something.
Yeah. Start
and in this great reset, make the future of work a better place, because we are on the brink of authoring a beautiful new age. It's up to us to be intentional with that. Lori, it's been a deep pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. I know we could keep going for probably several more hours, and I am looking forward to having one on conflict resolution, conflict management. That'll be a lot of fun too. So for those of you tuning in, either now or later, my deepest wish for you, my friends, is to keep elevating. Bye for now.
Thanks for having me.